At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1943, at WW2 airfield in New Guinea, Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched beneath the left wing of a P-38 Lightning, watching his pilot prepare for a mission he was unlikely to survive. The pilot was Lieutenant Robert Hayes, 23 years old, with 6 combat missions and no kills. The Japanese had dispatched 18 Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters to intercept the morning patrol. Hayes was about to fly straight into the middle of them. McKenna had been maintaining P-38s for 8 months. He knew the aircraft inside and out. Twin engines, twin booms, blisteringly fast in a straight line. A true predator at altitude. But the P-38 had one deadly flaw: it could not match the Zero in a turning fight. The Zero was lighter, more maneuverable. In a full horizontal turn, a Zero could outturn a P-38 nearly twice as fast. That difference meant death. American doctrine was strict. Never turn with a Zero. Never try to beat it with maneuverability. Use speed and altitude, dive, fire, climb away, hit and run. Do not get drawn into a turn. Hayes had followed that doctrine 5 times. It hadn't helped. The Zeros were smart. They lured pilots into turns, cut inside the radius, slipped onto their tails, and shot them down. In the past 6 weeks, the 5th Air Force had lost 37 P-38s. Most were killed because they couldn't escape a turn. McKenna had seen too many good men die. Kids really climbing into their cockpits full of confidence, coming back in boxes or not coming back at all. The reports said pilot error. The instructors said failure to follow doctrine. But McKenna knew better. The problem wasn't the pilots. The problem was the control cables. The P-38's aileron cables ran through the twin booms to the tail, then back through pulleys to the wings. The system had a small amount of slack, about 3/8 of an inch at full deflection. That tiny slack created a delay between stick movement and aileron response. At high speed, it didn't matter. But at low speed, in a hard turn, that fraction of a second decided life or death. McKenna had told the engineering officer about it 2 months earlier. The answer was firm. Tension is within specifications. Factory approved. Any modification voids the warranty. A field mechanic has no authority to alter flight controls. Approval must come from Lockheed, in California, 7,000 miles away. So McKenna did something that violated every rule of the Army Air Forces. He took a 6-inch length of piano wire salvaged from a damaged aircraft, bent it into a Z-shape, and installed it as a tension adjuster on Hayes's left aileron cable. The modification took 8 minutes. It added 0.4 pounds of tension to the cable, completely eliminating the slack. No one noticed. The inspectors checked oil and ammunition, nothing more. McKenna said nothing. He watched Hayes taxi to the runway, lift off, and disappear into the morning sky. In the next 17 minutes, the way every P-38 fought in the Pacific Theater would change forever. McKenna had lost far too many pilots to the Zero before. He had listened to their stories, signed off on their aircraft, and talked with some of them about California. They all said the same thing. During hard maneuvering, there was a slight delay in roll. The pilots assumed it was normal behavior for a heavy fighter. But when McKenna held the cables in his hands, he could feel the slack. He could even tell by the sound, the low hum of a properly tensioned cable when plucked, and the different note of a loose one. Every P-38 on the airfield had slightly loose cables. Within specifications, but loose. One evening, after losing yet another pilot, he spoke with his friend, Mechanic Rodriguez. There was a solution, unauthorized, and one that could land him in a court-martial. Lieutenant Robert Hayes had been in New Guinea for 2 months. A farmer's son from Iowa, 6 missions, no victories. Not because he was a poor pilot, but because he followed the rules too well. On earlier missions, he had made perfect diving attacks from altitude, lined up a zero, and the zero snapped into a turn. Or when he fired the first burst, the delay let the enemy escape or reverse on him. The worst moment came 2 days earlier, when his wingman was killed. Separated during a fight over Finschhafen, 2 zeros got on his tail. The frantic radio call, "It won't turn fast enough." Then the sound of gunfire, a scream, and silence. McKenna had serviced that aircraft too. On paper, everything was perfect. That night, Hayes came to the maintenance area and asked McKenna if there was any way to make the aircraft turn faster. Rules didn't matter, he just wanted a chance. McKenna told him to come back in the morning. Left alone in the damp hangar, McKenna opened the panel, felt the slack with his fingers, and installed the piano wire. His hands were slick with oil, his fingers split by the stiff wire, his heart pounding. If it failed, Hayes would crash and it would be McKenna's fault. But if it worked, by dawn, Hayes had taken off. McKenna stood by the runway and waited. The fight began at 8:14 over Huon Gulf. Hayes's four-ship Dove from altitude onto 9 zeros. Hayes made the first dive and fired hits but not a kill. The zero snapped into a turn. This time, when Hayes turned with it, the P-38 responded instantly. No delay. The aircraft rolled faster than it ever had before. The zero reappeared in the gun sight. A second burst, the engine exploded. First victory. Then the zeros reversed. Doctrine said to climb away. But Hayes turned with them. The Lightning maneuvered with unexpected speed. In seconds, he shot down 2 more. A fourth escaped. 3 victories in 7 minutes. When he landed, Hayes's hands were shaking with adrenaline. He went straight to McKenna and said 2 words. It worked. The word spread fast. Other pilots noticed that Hayes's aircraft maneuvered unlike any P-38 they had flown. They asked for the same change. McKenna modified more aircraft. The technicians shared the secret. 8 minutes, piano wire, a Z-bend, a tension adjuster spliced into the cable. By September, dozens, perhaps hundreds, of P-38s had it. They removed the wire before inspections, then reinstalled it afterward. The kill ratio changed. In July, they were losing at 2:1. By September, it was even and then in their favor. Japanese aces reported that American P-38s were suddenly turning faster and reversing maneuvers. Tactics that had worked for months no longer did. Even legends like Saburo Sakai barely escaped some fights, bewildered by what had changed. They never found the modification, a hidden 6-inch wire inside the boom. By the end of 1943, P-38s were hunting zeros. Japanese command issued orders. Do not engage unless you have numerical superiority. The modification later became official on newer models, but McKenna received no recognition. Hayes returned from the war with 11 victories. Others survived too. Lives saved, an estimated 80 to 100. McKenna went home, opened a garage, and rarely spoke about the war. True innovation in war doesn't come from committees. It comes from sergeants who see a problem, find a solution, and act without waiting for permission. This is a real but rarely told story from World War II, how one mechanic's unauthorized modification changed the balance in the sky. This modification was never officially authorized during the war. In October 1943, a technical inspector at WW2 noticed irregularities in control cable tension, discovered the piano wires, and filed a report up the chain of command. The report sat on officers' desks for 3 weeks. The modification violated regulations, but the results were undeniable. Squadrons using it had higher kill ratios, and their pilots were surviving. The real question was not whether the modification worked, but whether to punish the mechanics who installed it without authorization, or to approve it after the fact. In November, a team of Lockheed engineers arrived in New Guinea to examine the modification. They measured the tension, calculated the loads, and conducted flight tests. Their conclusion: the modification was safe and effective. The original design should have been built this way from the start. Lockheed introduced a similar tension system on the P-38J model that entered production in December 1943. But McKenna received no official recognition, no medal, no mention in any report. In Lockheed's official documents, the improvement was credited to engineering analysis. Hayes survived the war. He flew 63 missions and shot down 11 Japanese aircraft. In 1945, he returned to Iowa, married his high school sweetheart, had 4 children, and spent 37 years flying crop-dusting aircraft. He never forgot McKenna. Every year on August 17th, he called to thank him for saving his life. Mitchell survived as well. He became a squadron commander, led operations during the Philippine campaign, and scored 16 victories. After the war, he stayed in the Air Force and retired as a colonel in 1963. He told McKenna's story to every young technical officer, reminding them that sometimes the best solutions don't come from engineers, but from enlisted mechanics who see the problem firsthand. McKenna served in the Army Air Forces until 1946, returned to California, and went back to repairing cars. In 1948, he opened his own garage in Long Beach. He worked on engines for 42 years. He rarely spoke about the war. When asked, he would say, "I was an aircraft mechanic. I fixed planes." In 1991, a military historian researching P-38 modifications found a reference to piano wire in New Guinea maintenance logs. He tracked McKenna down through veterans' records and reached a 73-year-old man who was still working half-days in his garage. When asked, McKenna confirmed the story and said, "There was nothing special about it. It needed to be done." The historian estimated that, based on survival rates in the squadrons that used the modification, it may have saved the lives of 80 to 100 American pilots. McKenna replied, "I never counted. I remember the men who came back, Hayes, Mitchell, the others. That's enough." James McKenna died in 2006 at the age of 88. He is buried at Pacific View Memorial Park in California. His obituary mentioned only that he had been an aircraft mechanic during World War II. Nothing about the piano wire. Nothing about changing how American fighters flew. Nothing about breaking rules to save lives. The garage in Long Beach still stands, now under different ownership. But on the back wall, there is still a photograph. A young mechanic in a flight jacket standing beside a P-38 Lightning. On the back, a handwritten note reads, "August 1943, New Guinea." This is how real innovation happens in war, not through official channels or committees, but through enlisted sergeants who see a problem, find a solution, and save lives without waiting for permission. This story reminds us what true heroism in war really looks like. Not actions done for medals or glory, but acts carried out to save the lives of comrades. Even if his name never appeared in official records, every victory in the sky and every pilot who returned home alive carried McKenna's contribution. He never considered himself a hero. He simply saw a problem, found a solution, and acted without asking permission, without waiting for bureaucracy. Because in war, time is the most precious resource, and saving lives is the highest duty. Today, the P-38 Lightning stands in museums and is illustrated in history books. But its most important improvement, a small piece of piano wire hidden inside the boom, was never put on display. It was simply the signature of one mechanic, one man's decision, yet it changed the course of the war. Because of people like James McKenna, American pilots began to defeat the zero. The skies over the Pacific became American skies, and the war moved one step closer to its end.